Hi, romance readers. I am Liz Donatelli. Welcome to Reader Seeks Romance, the #1 romance novel talk show on YouTube. Critically acclaimed YA author Amy Spalding joins me to discuss her debut adult romance, For Her Consideration. And Amy shares her reading list and her writing life in Quickies Q&A segment. Enjoy, and be sure to like and subscribe. Welcome to Reader Seeks Romance, Amy.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so exciting.
Congratulations on the release of your queer romance, For Her Consideration.
Thank you so much.
I'd like to begin with sharing some praise. Pure romance magic, Christina Lauren. I loved how joyful, how thoughtful, and how real For Her Consideration was, Jasmine Guillory. A warm celebration of Los Angeles, chosen family, and learning how to love and be loved, actor, comedian, and best-selling author Cameron Esposito. Library Journal said, an optimistic, empathetic choice for readers, which highlights queer women pursuing creative careers and showcases a strong emotional growth arc. How does that make you feel? With these authors on your wish list, or how did that happen? Because these are fantastic endorsements of your novel.
You know, I feel really lucky. I do think that the world of romance, I have found it to be really welcoming. I've been friends with Jasmine Guillory actually for years before either one of us was published. So she read it very early on when we were going out to sell it. My agent's like, well, has Jasmine read it? Could she give us a blurb now? And I was like, she's very busy. I don't want to bother her. Of course, Jasmine's like, you are allowed to bother me. We are friends. So it was really nice to go into the whole process having that. And Christina Lauren and I always feel weird saying it because I'm like, they are two humans, but they're also one name as a writer. But we did an event together at Las Vegas Book Festival and just sort of like, hit it off, stayed in touch. And so it was really fun to reach out and be like, I'm doing this thing now. And that was after, once I met them and started reading their books. I mean, they're so, I don't know if you all have heard, but Christina Lauren writes some great books.
Yes. Yes. Agreed. And,
she is someone in the queer community who I think is so good at uplifting smaller voices and people with smaller platforms when she is, she's someone who's built such a great platform. And I think it's so rad that she uses it to help other people and not just be famous herself, which is, I feel like maybe what I would do.
Right. Well, as you laugh.
I mean, not intentionally. I think I just feel like, oh, great. Thank God I made it. And then go along with my life. Listening to all these blurbs, it's really lovely. I feel so fortunate. We were chatting a little before this started, but when I started sending the book out for blurbs, people are busy. They have other things to do. And some people did not respond to my emails. And I thought like, oh my gosh, no one's going to read this. No one's going to blurb it. I'm going to have the one from Jasmine, which is fantastic. But, I'd like more than one ideally. And so I panicked and started asking more people. And they were all so nice. And they're like, we understand, of course, we have less time, but we're going to get back to you. And then like everyone responded. And I ended up with like so many lovely blurbs. But for my first adult book, I wanted to feel like I was going in strong. I wanted to feel, we all just want to feel accepted, and starting in a new genre was really scary. So It was, again, I've just found the romance community so supportive, and I just feel very lucky.
Yeah.
I work with Liz's husband in my day job. So we go way back.
That's right. We do. I remember years ago when, I think Tom first started working with you. He's like, "Oh yeah, I work with this Amy, and has a YA book coming out. Your debut hadn't even come out yet." I was like, "Oh really? Oh, that's interesting." Reese Malcolm List.
Reese Malcolm List, yeah.
And he's like, "Oh," because he knew that I, was a reader and all that. And then we've known each other for a long time.
I also feel like we're two of the people who probably give Tom the most shit. That's just sort of exciting.
It's interesting because he never mentions to me anything that you might, but he never mentions it to me.
Well, that's actually nice to hear because sometimes I'm like, am I just too mean to Tom? Sometimes he just makes it easy for me to like poke fun at him.
Well, you see, that just shows maybe how much more I give him than you because he's used
That is
to it.
absolutely possible. Yeah.
So he's like, oh, she can't do
This is
anything
a
to me
very
like
low level.
Yeah. Yes, for sure. In For Her Consideration, Ari, a Hollywood actress on the rise, and Nina, a semi-reclusive communications expert, are your romance protagonists. So, first question, what makes Ari and Nina a great couple? And what obstacles do they face?
I feel like in most good like romantic pairings, there's this level of they see each other in like a way that other people miss, or they see like what matters deep down to that person. You know, Ari is, you know, she's not a super famous person, but her, you know, she's one of those people kind of on everyone's radar. She's like moving up in the world. And so her life has become just like a nonstop series of like meetings about like her academy chances and roles she's going to take. And people kind of treating her like a commodity and like that there's a certain way for her to start behaving. And Nina, after a bad breakup, has, you know, sent herself up to the suburbs to get away from her former life, including her former friends, and danger of running into her ex-girlfriend. And so she is someone who sort of has taken herself out of society and kind of has considered herself like, well, I had my fun, I'm done. Now I'm just gonna stay inside my aunt's condo and do my remote job, and that's fine. And you know, Ari sees that there's so much in Nina that's fun, that's giving, that's open. And Nina can see that Ari is still a human and not just like a celebrity who has to go through media training and is, you know, constantly annoying her agent, manager, publicist, etc., by being a little too bossy and headstrong. And so, you know, they really connect as two people who are not hung up on whatever their, you know, their previous baggage is, or how the rest of the world maybe sees them, or how they worry the rest of the world sees them in Nina's case, and really find that connection together.
Yeah.
You know, but as far as obstacles go, obviously all those things I listed are going to also come back and bite them in the ass, because Ari is super bossy and sees things a certain way and wants things a certain way and is used to getting her way.
Yeah.
And, you know, Nina built a whole life running away from people. So she's really good at it.
Yes. And, you know, I have to say, you did mention, and it comes up several times, that Ari's agent, who is Nina's boss, you know, mentions about, oh, yeah, Ari is so difficult. And, you know, I thought Ari was reasonable. It's like, I'm new to this whole thing. I want to know how this works, where you're communicating on my behalf and da 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 da. I was like, so I really thought, I was like, Ari, I would be doing the same thing, probably more. I'd probably, you know.
I agree. I do think that there's a level, especially for women in any sort of like creative field where you're making money, we're expected to be very grateful for these opportunities and sort of do what people expect of you. And I think Ari's a bit like, no. I want to do my, I just want to know what these things are about, and I want to make my own choices. And I think there's a level of like, no, but we already know all the right choices, so just make those.
Yeah. Yes.
And I don't think what she's asking for at all is unreasonable, but I think there's a level, you know, again, in, you know, especially the higher pressure and higher visibility levels of fame of Hollywood, I think there's just a real push to like, you act a certain way, you're rewarded a certain way, and that's a career. And when you're like, no, I have my own feelings about that, I think sometimes people don't know how to react.
Gotcha. Well, that makes sense. Speaking of the world in which Ari and Nina live and work, Hollywood. So Nina works at the Los Angeles talent agency that represents Ari, and her job is a job that I didn't realize exists, which is handling the email communications almost in ghostwriter fashion for the talent. So Nina will respond to requests or send thank yous and sign it as the talent. That way it's one less thing that they have to do. Plus it's understood that, like you said, the talent agency, like, we know better. We know what the right move is for you and what you should say in this situation. So I was actually, even though I lived in Los Angeles for 17 years and knew people in the industry, I never knew this was an actual job. So one, Did you recently find out this was a job? Did you always know what this was a job? And who did you talk to learn the ins and outs of that job?
So here's where I get to admit I did a little inventing here. It is part of a job. I don't think it's maybe a whole job, which is why I play a little fast and loose with Nina being remote and maybe is not always working 40 hours a week. But I was actually dealing with a celebrity via email, and I will not name them, but they're I don't know the level of fame. I'll just say they're a younger person, so I don't think they're very famous, but I think they are maybe because I'm old and I don't know what young people are. So I was dealing with this celebrity, and we had to email about something, and I get an email and it's like, this is not there's no way she wrote this. I just don't believe it. It was like an AOL address. And I was like, why would she spend the time to write like this really professional email to me? But then I was like, is it her? Maybe it is. I wouldn't suspect AOL. Maybe that's how she keeps fans away who are weird. Right. And then I just kept reading it and thinking about it. And it made me feel crazy because I was just like, who wrote this email? And then it was lockdown. So I also had a lot of time to think.
Yeah.
And I remember I was in the shower and I was like, what is the woman's life like who wrote me that email pretending to be like a young hot celebrity who's just managing like something about like, you know, a book with an author? I was like, who is this woman? And then I started to think about like, that would be so fun to write a book about someone who has that job. And then I was like, oh, and obviously she would fall in love with the celebrity she writes as. And like within 10 minutes, I had like half the book outlined.
So that was the genesis of For Her Consideration.
Yeah, that was literally it. And again, it was lockdown. I had so much time to think. Yeah. So I just like, I feel like had I gotten that same email not during lockdown, I would have been like, oh, that's weird. And like moved on.
While writing For Her Consideration, did Ari and Nina speak to you and instruct you on how their romance journey should unfold on the page? If so, did you listen to them? Did you have these battles with them? Do tell.
You know, I'm a real outliner these days. Unlike my younger self, who then had to spend way more time rewriting things. And so by the time I was really writing, I had a general idea of how I maybe thought things would lay out. But I always sort of leave my outlines open. Like I know the general beats of what's going to happen. Yeah. But I like there being room for like discovery. And so like you can say, oh, these two people are going to be attracted to each other. But I feel like until you're writing it, I don't exactly know how their banter is going to be. I don't know like maybe the vibe they're going to have together. And so that is definitely something I feel like I never think of it as the character speaking to me. It's just this weird thing where you're writing and it's just like taking care of itself. And you're like, well, I guess that's what it's going to be.
Okay. See, I would call that channeling.
I absolutely think that's so funny because when people are like, oh, I just spent a morning having a daydream, I'm like, I would never. I am not that precious about my writing. And then I'm like, I did go into the shower for 10 minutes and think out this whole. I was like, that's the same thing. Yeah, but it's funny because I do feel like we all think of it differently, and it feels even though we're all just doing like we're doing the same thing.
Doing the same thing. Yeah, yeah.
But it is a weird feeling to be like, oh, like to some degree, I just have to sit down and see what happens. It's like, well, but it's me doing it. Like, I don't know why. I don't know what's going to happen.
Right. I know. It's fascinating, isn't it?
Because I'm like, what part of my brain is just like, I'm ahead of you here. Don't worry. I don't know. To me, that's one of the truest joys of writing is the aspect of like discovery as you go, because you're like, I wrote what was going to happen and I'm still like, ooh, this is fun.
Tell me about a case when that happened. So you just writing, you're like, ooh, I didn't expect that to come out. Like, was it some of like the intimate scenes? Like, were you like, oh, I didn't think that sexy comment would come out, and it did, or, you know?
I feel like I planned those more because it was my first adult book. And I was like, you got to make people understand you're here now. There's a art print of David Hasselhoff that becomes meaningful. And that was definitely something that I wrote a little joke because I was trying to think of like what would be on the wall of a TGI Fridays. And I think I even texted friends of like, what would a funny celebrity be that you saw like an Andy Warhol style print of them at a TGI Fridays. And one of my friends suggested David Hasselhoff. And I was like, great. I didn't think anything beyond, but then I kept thinking about it and making more jokes about it. And then like, you know, obviously it plays like kind of a role in the book. But like that is, I certainly was not writing out my outline and like, and then they saw a print of David Hasselhoff and it becomes meaningful.
Being you mentioned TGI Fridays. Okay. So first of all, for some reason, I thought that there weren't any more TGI Fridays in the world because I used to go there frequently with friends in college Friday night, and we'd have the my Oreo Madness. I think was the big dessert at the time. Now this was when I don't know. This was in the 90s.
Yeah.
The late
That
90s.
is also when I spent my time at TGI Fridays.
Yeah. Okay. So it was just like, oh my God, it was like a bacchanalia. Like we're just like eating and laughing. And it was just like, we're just drunk on life and food.
Yes. And like cocktails that are just so large and like full of desserts also.
Well, that's what I want to talk about is okay. You mentioned, a drink. The best Fridays margarita. First of all, I didn't even realize they had an official name, but anyway. And it is trademarked. Like the TM is written in the book. And I feel like there's a story. First of all, did you realize it was trademarked? In using a trademark in your work, do you need to pay? Does your publisher pay for that privilege? Like, do you need to write to TGI Fridays and get permission? And was it so important to you to have the name of it that you were like, I will put it in trademarked?
Yeah, actually, it just became really important to me. And so I put it in trademarked and was like, what's going to happen? And no one said anything. And like, it's just in it. So no, we didn't have to pay for it. I feel like so many of my answers are like, well, it was lockdown and I had a lot of time alone. So here I am hard at work researching the TGI Fridays menu. And I thought like they always have names for the drinks. It's not like you just order like a margarita. There's probably a name for it. So then I found out that it's like it's like the best margarita, like
okay, it's the best Fridays margarita. So the best Fridays is what's I believe
like the trademark.
Yeah.
And I found that so funny because it's like it's just a margarita. But also like the thought of, and I have this in the book that I just feel like a margarita at a chain restaurant, that's not really a Mexican chain restaurant. Like, what is the context of this drink? There's none. It's just there. And I found it so funny. Again, I was not socializing with anyone at this point. So I had a lot of time to think and a lot of time to like make little jokes to myself. But it struck me as so funny. And I also, when I go to the suburbs to like do an event or hang out with a friend, I always want to go to a chain restaurant because like I grew up in Missouri. I grew up going like my nice night out was like going to a chain restaurant. So I love recreating that feel. And it struck me as so funny. And I thought they would feel the same way. They're both women who grew up in the suburbs. And so like, they would be like, this is a thing that's both familiar to me and also like not a part of my life now.
Yeah.
And so I just thought they would read the drink name the way I would in this situation, which would be to read the whole thing aloud, including the trademark. So yes, that became important to me to include. And then it's that thing of like, I didn't write this under contract or anything. I didn't have a contract because it was, a new genre for me. My agent didn't know I was writing it. I was just, home alone being like, I was waiting for word if my YA novel was going to get purchased or not. So I thought, well, I don't want to write another YA novel. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. And so I just wrote this book for fun. And so there comes a point where it stops being a little Word document on your computer for fun. It's like a manuscript that professionals are going to read. And then you're like, why is there so many jokes about TGI Fridays margaritas in here? Well, too late to do anything about it now.
Well, I loved it. And knowing you, it made it more entertaining. And I laughed out loud several times because not only was it funny as a reader who doesn't know you, but as a reader who knows you, it was even funnier to me. So why romance? Why adult romance?
Well, it's so funny because I really thought, I think it's a trend right now that a lot of YA authors are sort of getting into adult romance or they're getting into middle grade. So for like younger kids. And I really thought I would get into that because those are all my favorite books growing up. Like the Babysitter's Club is like a formative text for me. It's very important. And so I was like, that's what I'll do. And so I read all these middle grade novels and I like them, but I'm not feeling that sort of like resonance, like between myself and the text and like, oh, I can't wait to tell my story like this too.
Right.
Sorry that cats are meowing in the background.
Oh, no, that's okay. I don't hear them. I don't hear cats meowing at all. I see cats, but that's fine.
Yeah. Anyone who's going to interview me, you're going to see cats.
That's fine. I've had cats. There's a number of authors who have cats, dogs, people walking behind and closing and opening doors. So I've had all manner of activities. Don't worry.
If you see a person, let me know, because it's definitely a murderer. So it'll be good to know.
That is something I have thought about many a time, is what if I'm in, because there's been authors who there's like an open door or a doorway or something. I'm like, oh my God, what would I do if like this person just comes out and attacks them? Like, do I keep it recording?
I love that you're like, well, I know that you're being strangled, but do you have a favorite trope? Any recent reads you've got to tell us about? I love if the murderer like stops and he's like, I love only one bed.
The scene that made me laugh out loud so much, and I kept laughing every time I kept thinking about it.
I knew it was going to be the
scene.
There's
a scene where Nita is texting Ari early on in their, whatever this is. They're starting to talk and, hanging out. And there's a typo where Nita ends a statement with a corn and a tooth. And what was funny is at first she's like, oh, there was a corn. And then she looked and she realized there was also a tooth that she accidentally added. And wondering what is, Ari going to think? I thought that was so hilarious because, I mean, we've all done stuff like that. So I want to know, do you have your own corn and tooth emoji moments to share?
Everyone who read it early on, that was the scene that like killed them. And I like, it made me feel like before the book was even finished, and I was like, okay, I'm on the right track. If that is funny to other people. I never had anything as bad as the corn and tooth incident. Okay. I did, a friend, and she like announced on, I think it was like a close friend story on Instagram, that she was breaking up. Her and her partner had broken up. And I tried to send 3 hearts, but I sent like 2 hearts and a skull. And then I hit send and I was like, and then I like texted hearts and I was like, I meant all hearts, not a skull. I'm so sorry. Let me know if you need to talk. Let me know if you need any help. But it was like, I was flailing because I'm like, I'm really trying to be, also like, your friend goes through a really hard breakup. Maybe also say something more than just send 3 hearts. But I just wanted to like respond immediately to be like, I love you. I care about you. What do you need? And I just felt like 2 hearts. And I was at like a bar. So my friends all saw me do it. And they were all screaming. They're like, you have to stop sending more messages. I was like, I'm just explaining.
Well, if someone sent me, if in that situation, someone sent me 2 hearts and a skull, I would actually feel like the person was sending love and threatening to hurt for me. Like to hurt this person, like to kill. So I actually would have been like okay with that. I would have at first been like,
I actually think I would have too, but it just felt weak. Like it just felt like no one sends 2 hearts and a skull. That's not we haven't recognized that as like a standard comforting friend, group of emojis.
Well, I think we should.
Maybe not. Everyone tested it out. Let us know how it goes. What I realized too is that I really like books where people kiss. And so I mean, and I don't mean reading. I read all sorts of books where people don't kiss, or it's like not a fun kiss because it's like a tragic book. But when I write them, I like getting people together. I like romantic scenes. I love banter. I love all that stuff. And I just thought like, you should be wanting to write romance. And I always felt really intimidated by it. And I don't know if it's because I had friends who wrote it, like Jasmine, who I just admired so much. Yeah. I don't know if it was just sort of like the idea of like, well, I write for kids and they write for adults and that's that. But, more of my friends were starting to branch out too. And I thought like, well, why not just try it? You're on, again, it's lockdown. No one knows what anyone's working on. You don't have to tell your agent. You can just write it and see if it happens. And if it's garbage, no one ever has to know about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
and then I love doing it.
For Her Consideration to me reads not like your first adult romance. Now, I know that you have written, YA with romantic threads. And so it's not like you're foreign to romance or writing love stories, but you're so dialed in to adult romance. Like, to me, it just seemed to me like a seamless transition as someone reading your work. And I felt like it was the most realistic, even though there's a celebrity and you think, well, that's fantastic, right? How am I going to, but it still made sense because this is a celebrity, an actress on the rise. So she's not mega famous. And of course, they do have day-to-day interactions with people who are not famous. So I was like, okay, I could, and I love a good celebrity romance anyway.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. But it was a more realistic romance where you're like, okay, this is following a relatable flow and organic progression that made sense and realistic obstacles. Yeah, so I'm super impressed. So one of the reasons I wanted to read all that praise is because you deserve it. So yeah.
Really sweet. Thank you. It did hit me as I was writing that I was like so afraid to write adults. And it was like, I am an adult. Like, I'm like, what do 37-year-olds talk about? It's like, you're in your 40s. You have been all the ages of the people, and it was recent.
Yeah. Now that you have written one and you've enjoyed it and you dig the community and they dig you, are you going to regularly write adult romance?
Yeah, that is the goal.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. But you'll also be still writing YA as well? Or do you think you're going to pull back a little on?
I have a new YA out in April called No Boy Summer that I'm really excited about.
Oh, that's right.
Make sure you get a copy, Liz.
Oh.
And I have another YA I'm sort of like working on that is nobody, it's not promised to anyone. It's just sort of a for me project. Okay. And I don't know what happens after that because at a certain point, I don't think anyone's ever too old to write YA, but I do sometimes think of I don't know, did I have all my young ideas and now I'm settling into my more middle-aged ideas? Maybe. So right. I love the idea that I still have my foot in YA, that I'm doing both right now, that I still have some ideas in me for future YA. But yeah, I think, I'm excited to do both and I'm excited to sort of see where that leads me.
Not only did I fall in love with Ari and Nina, but I fell in love with the relationship between Nina and her friends. Okay. And I believe you've been told this before. If you haven't, I'm telling you, you write friendships beautifully.
Thank you.
I felt as if they were my friends and they would be friends I'd want. Just so compassionate and understanding and not trying to change their friend Nina. They see that she's, dealing with a lot and has dealt with a lot, but they're not like a lot of the friends that I read in romance fiction that drive me crazy. There are frequently friends in a protagonist's life who do nothing but tell them how they're messing up their life and you shouldn't be doing this and you need more sex and you need more of that and you need to go out and you need to change your whole life. And it drives me crazy. I just loved reading friends who I thought were just really good people and they were so accepting of Nina and so forgiving. How do you explain your friendship writing superpower? Because you're so good at writing friendships.
I feel like I'm so lucky. I have so many friends that I love so much, and they're such an important part of my life, many of whom I talk to every day or almost every day. And I think for me, I think that is something I felt like is missing from some romance novels. Not all. I think there's so many, I mentioned Jasmine at the top. I think Jasmine writes such beautiful groups of friends. And just the way they really function, in real life, which is that sometimes you have to be supportive. Sometimes you have to be a little hey, maybe you should work on this, but always coming from a place of love. And also that, your friendships can be as important as your family, as important as your romantic relationships. Yeah. And I think really valuing that, to me, is important to show, especially I think for queer people, when sometimes your chosen family is the one that really is the one seeing you for who you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
I also will say that I'm so flattered by you saying that. I feel like I've gotten better at writing friendships over the years. I feel like I was always good at writing one-on-one friendships, but I'd be like, oh my gosh, this scene has so many people. I don't know what I'm doing. I do want to credit my friend, YA writer Robin Schneider. She writes group scenes so well. And I was just like, what is she doing? And just reading them over and over to be and I think at a certain point, it's just you let everyone talk. And if you've got their dialogue down and their character, they will all shine. But it felt like unlocking some sort of secret. I was like, there's 4 people in the scene and they're all doing something. Wow. I don't know for sure, because definitely back when I was in like, like junior high age and a little younger, I read, there was, gosh, what were they called? There was like it wasn't a series, but it was like a young adult sort of line of books. I think they were called Sweet Dreams. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes. And someone else mentioned them on the show too.
It was, just young adult romances, but they weren't like connected or anything. But they were like authors would come back and write other books, or they'd have like a sequel, and that would be very exciting. But a lot of them were already out. So when I was that age reading them, so I go to like used bookstores and you can get like a whole bunch of them for like $1. And that was like, when I would find those, that was one of my favorite things. Yeah. And then I feel like I read like steamier books in like high school. Okay. But I don't remember. Like I definitely read some Danielle Steele, some Judith McNaught. Yeah. But like stuff I would get at like Sam's Club or Walmart. But I felt like it was a really short-lived time. And I admit that I was definitely someone who became like snobby about reading romance. But I also felt like, a lot of the mainstream romance, it didn't feel very like modern or exciting. And I didn't really know where to start otherwise. And then it was really when I read Jasmine's book, The Wedding Date, I was like, this is amazing. Wait, is this what romance is like now? And it was like, oh, so a whole section of the bookstore that I've ignored is awesome. And then it was great, because then I just got to like plow through it and like catch up and discover, like I said, discover authors like Christina Lauren. And it was sort of great, because it was sort of, I'd like done it to myself that I'd stopped in this category. But then I had all these books at my, like my little ebook reader was like becoming very full of romance novels. Wow. Nice. So yeah, it was like, I sort of had like a little journey with it, but now I'm like, I'm never stopping. Nice. I love to hear that. What are you currently reading? Ooh, I just finished Sorry Bro by Talene Fascuni. Oh yes. I loved it. It was one of those books. It was very long too. So I got to just like, I felt like live in that world in the Bay Area with this Armenian American group of friends and family, and just like really dig in. That's also a book where all the food made me so hungry. So I loved it. The romance in it is great. Despite the name, it is a queer romance about women. Yes. I'm reading a memoir / mystery now called Diary of a Misfit by Casey Parks, which it feels very much like an episode of This American Life or something that's like a whole book. It's nonfiction, but it's sort of like, it's a memoir, but it's also like a mystery she's trying to uncover. But in uncovering the mystery about someone else, she's sort of like uncovering things within herself that she's never fully dealt with. And so it's one of those books that every time I'll like just have time to read like one section, and then I'm just like, I feel like this is just such good writing. I feel very like, I love it when someone is just like, the prose is so good, and the level of like for all the things I like about my own writing, I don't have a lot of restraint. I'm like, I thought of an idea. Here it is. What about cats? What about TGI Fridays? And like, I love an author who has restraint and like really slowly unfolds and like gives you things a little at a time. Okay. It's like such a good feeling reading. Which book is on your to be read pile? I mean, I don't know about you all, but like my TBR is just nuts. I think the one I'm most excited about right now is Georgie All Along by Kate Claiborne. Ah, yes. I've loved her earlier books, and I've heard so many good things. I love the cover. It's so pretty. Yeah, it is. So it's one of those that I pre-ordered, and when it downloaded, I'm like, I don't have time for you yet, but I'm going to like really treasure our time together when I have a moment. Which book have you reread more than once? I feel like my answer, I feel like I just have weird answers to this because I'm known for like writing romantic comedies, and I like try to be a funny person, and all the books I reread are like tragic as hell. My favorite. You have to balance. There has to be that balance. I'm feeding something dark within, I think, and then I can like get out the light. But my favorite book is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro, which is just about, I mean, it doesn't really matter what it's about. It's just people are dying, everything is sad, but it's also just like a beautiful, like British, like sort of like a boarding school setting. And I love this book so much. I've read it so many times, and I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with me that I'm like, this is just tragedy. And it's one of those books where the tragedy is baked in at the beginning, so there's like no way out of it. I
Okay.
also, there's a book called it's a memoir called Borrowed Time by Paul Monette, which is a memoir he wrote while his partner got diagnosed early in the AIDS epidemic, and just like caring for him as he died. This is one of the most beautiful books I've read about love and loss. Why have I read it so many times? Probably too many. It's like, again, the sadness is baked in by the premise of the book.
Yeah.
And Fun Home by Alison Bechdel, graphic memoir, also, you know, has some, you know, dad suicide in it. These are what I'm filling my brain with, and then I'm writing and reading romantic comedies. So,
well, it works.
Something, yeah. I just think it's always
works.
funny when people are like, I gotta know what you read the most, and I'm like, well, these are the books about death.
Which is easier, writing the first draft or editing it?
This has been so different for me book by book. I just wrote a first draft that was so painful. Ooh. And now that I'm editing it, I'm like, easy breezy. But for her consideration, that first draft, just like, it, for most of it was very, I don't want to say easy, but it was the easiest part of the process.
Okay.
So yeah, it's kind of annoying because like I wrote, you know, my first couple books I wrote without having an editor, without knowing, you know, completely what I was doing. And then, you know, you have editors, you've gone through the process. I'm like, I figured out how to write a book. And then it's annoying. You're like, oh, no, I haven't, because every book is its own stupid thing. So I haven't nailed anything. I just have to keep learning.
Which is the better compliment from a reader? Quote, you write compelling protagonists, or, quote, you write compelling conflict.
Oh, I think for me, well, I know that I write better characters than conflict. So part of me is like, well, I like the first because that's what I get. But if someone said, ooh, compelling conflict, I'd be like, thank you. I struggle.
Okay. Yeah. Are you a pantser, a plotter, or a plantser?
You know, I will say, I personally feel like my entire writing life got easier when I started outlining. And it's such, I just feel like narcs outline. I'm always like, I'm so sorry, I'm not a cop. I just think you should all outline. But like I said, I still give myself some room. It's a very mild outlining. It is chapter by chapter at a certain point, but it's very much like they have a fun experience. And then I'm like, I don't know what that's. And then I hit that point in the outline. I'm like, what is the fun experience? But it's very much like by this point they should be growing closer. By this, it's loose. There's room, and I also re-outline as I go, because you learn about characters. You like, things are different as you're going, and I will. The nice thing is you can just rewrite the outline. It is so much easier than rewriting a book later.
Very true. Yeah, that makes sense. Which is more difficult for you to write? The opening line of a novel or the very last line?
Those are both hard. You know, I will say that the opening line, you feel a lot of pressure because you're like, that's the first thing they're going to read. But a lot of times I feel lucky that the opening line or something like it is the thing that's like in my head as I'm like getting excited to write it. I'm sort of like envisioning what that's going to be. Whereas like the closing line, I feel like, I don't know, I don't walk around like fantasizing about like the last page, except just then my work is done and I feel accomplished. Right. So I feel like I've thought about it less, but I also feel like slightly less pressure. And then in romance, there's like the last scene, but then there's like an epilogue and then has another one. So I also feel like that kind of takes the pressure off, because you're like, well, there's the one that closes the main part of the story, and then there's the actual one. So as long as they're both kind of okay.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Which is easier for you to write, the book dedication or the acknowledgments?
Ooh,
I think
the dedication is easier because I usually have a very specific idea. If you look at my acknowledgments, they're all like, to this person. Like, I don't say anything nice. I don't like get into it. Why? I'm just like, to you. I'm really like not fussy that way.
Yeah.
And then at the end there's so much more, and you have to remember everyone. And a lot of times when you're writing the acknowledgments, you wrote the book like 2 years ago, and maybe you did the research like a year before that.
Yeah.
So then I'm like, who helped me? Who talked to me about this? Who did I? Oh yeah, my friend named this, like, my friend made this joke that I use in the book. Okay. Oh, I talked to this guy. And so like, it becomes like, I get so nervous that I'm going to forget someone.
Oh, yeah.
So like, that's so much more stressful to me.
Have you ever had anyone come up to you and say, why wasn't I mentioned in the acknowledgments?
Yes, I did.
Really?
And it was like, it was uncomfortable because it was like someone I was not super close to. And she's like, I better be in the acknowledgments next time. And I just like, I didn't want to say like, well, you won't be, but like, it was like, we're not that close. It made me so uncomfortable.
Oh, wow. That's something else. Like, I can't imagine someone would say something.
Yeah, I've definitely had it where like, I'm not mentioned by someone who I thought would have. I think it. I don't say it to their face.
Yeah. Yeah. What are you currently working on?
I am I'll just say I'm gonna work on some more adult romance and see what happens.
Nice. That is the correct answer. You've won.
Thank God.
Well, Amy, I've thoroughly enjoyed chatting with you. Thank you for taking time to join me here on Reader Seeks Romance.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun, and it was so good to talk to you.